All right, everybody gather around when you're ready. We're going to get started with the one and only Tim McDonald, fellow Tim as we call each other's. And my microphone has stopped working, so that happened. But I'm really grateful to have Tim here. Tim is going to share about his journey. He recently had a liver transplant, and he's helping others. And so he's going to talk about his story, about self-advocacy, about hope, and what, I'm sure he'll talk about how he's helping others as well. So I want to bring on Tim McDonald. Here we go.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. It's great to be here. I wish I was there with all of you. But it's been kind of a crazy month, so I'm glad I'm able to do it this way.
We're grateful to have you here. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and we'll come back when you're done. And if we have time for a few questions, then we'll do that if you're cool with that.
Yeah, I don't think I'll take the whole 30 minutes, so we should have some time towards the end that you have allotted. I didn't want to go over with the full 30 minutes and not have time for that. So
sounds good. I know you're all about community, so
yeah.
Go ahead, Tim. Thank you.
All right. Well, first, before I get into my story too much, I want to talk about something that I think almost anybody that's impacted by cancer has heard before, the word hope. And what I've learned, and you'll see it through the rest of my story, is I have come to learn that hope is just another 4-letter word. But I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying when you couple it with a strong belief, it's much better, because hope is something that may happen, whereas belief is something will happen. And there's a huge distinction between those two. And I'm going to give you examples throughout my story. But first, before we get too far into that, I just want to share. When I first learned about having cancer, I was just having a pain in my side. I've learned medical terms, right flank, over Thanksgiving, and it got progressively worse. This is almost 3 years ago now. But by Sunday, I was waiting for Monday to come around. It was so bad that I just told my wife I was going to the urgent care center. They didn't know what it was, thought it possibly could have been kidney stones, ordered a CT scan for me. So that Monday, I went, got a CT scan. They told me, don't call them back. Whoever referred me from the urgent care would get the results, and they'd let me know. I live right behind the urgent care place, so it's somewhere I can walk. And I got the call Monday afternoon to see if I could come in. And I said, sure. And I remember joking with my wife as I left the house that day that I guess it wasn't going to be as simple as them just calling in a prescription for me. So I walked on over, and I knew something was a little bit different. When I walked in, they said, oh, you're Mr. McDonald. Come on back. All of us know, even if you don't have cancer, anytime you walk in a doctor's office, urgent care, anywhere, the first thing you do is register. I didn't have to do any of that. I got right back into a clinic office visit room. And about 2 seconds later, the doctor walked in with one sheet of paper, and I heard those 3 infamous words, you have cancer. But the one thing that I did a little bit different than most people was I believed very strongly at that point in my life, through some practice and exercises that I had done for the last 10 years, that no matter what those words were, nothing I could do would go back and change what I just heard. So what I could do, and really the only thing for me to do at that particular moment, was understand what I needed to do next. What was I supposed to do to help me get over this? I didn't look at it as a death sentence. I had no idea what even stage 4 meant at the time. I had no idea what terminal meant. I did know what terminal meant, but not in the terms of what they diagnosed me with. And so I really just went home, settled in for about 24 hours, and started thinking, so many people think, why me? But I was thinking of it a little bit differently. I was thinking about, why did this happen to me? What am I supposed to do with it? What opportunity exists here for me? And that's when I started really realizing that I needed to become an advocate, because I didn't even know the journey I was about to embark on, but I just knew that it wasn't going to be fun. It wasn't going to be pleasant. and the outcome probably wasn't going to be great. But the one thing that I could do is help other people get screened so they wouldn't have to go through this, because early detection, especially for colon cancer, it's very treatable disease. It's when it gets to the advanced stages that it becomes a terminal disease. And so my job was to really become an advocate. I just help people be aware of when they could get screened, why they should get screened, and that it really wasn't that bad. Still to this day, anybody I see post a story about how horrible the prep day is before your colonoscopy, I remind them that it's much better than going to chemo every 2 weeks. And that usually shuts them up. And because I don't want that to be a deterrent for other people that are thinking about going and getting a colonoscopy to get screened for colon cancer. But the one thing that did was, by me doing this, I've had 12 people, at least 12 people, personally acknowledge to me that I saved their lives, because they got their colonoscopies after I was diagnosed, probably after they should have, but they got it done. They all found polyps in them. So those polyps turn into cancer. And that's what eventually leads to our tumors. And so when they removed the polyps during the colonoscopy, they credited me for saving their life. The one thing I really feel strongly about, and I remind them, is I didn't save their life. I just inspired them. But without them taking the action, they would have never saved their lives. But this was just the start of me becoming an advocate. And I figured I could have more of an impact if I really got involved in these other groups. And, one of the things, the first group I ever got involved in, and it was like about 2 weeks after I was diagnosed, and I have no idea how I found out about it, but a mutual friend connected me with somebody in Man Up to Cancer, and it's a men's emotional support group for anybody that has cancer. And I loved it, and I loved the connections I was getting. But the one thing that we didn't talk about there was really treatments. And so the guy who welcomed me into Man Up to Cancer, Joe Bullock, actually invited me to check out Colon Town. So I got involved in Colon Town, and Colon Town is where I actually learned about the liver transplants and that being a potential option for me. I also then, from Man Up to Cancer and Joe Bullock, learned about Fight CRC, Fight Colorectal Cancer. They have an ambassador class, basically advocates that they welcome in and train each year. And once you're an ambassador, you're always an ambassador. But during your ambassador year, you get the training, you get featured in a lot of their social media and blogs and everything. And so I joined as an ambassador for Fight CRC. I'm still active with them. I was a mentor for last year's ambassador class. I'm going to be a mentor for the Colon Congress this year. The amazing thing here is just how much it connected me with, and again, started learning and connecting with other people who had had liver transplants already with metastasized colorectal cancer. And so, that really, as I started down this path of a liver transplant, it really got me the idea that all of us need to go out and find our own donors. There's, like, when I was searching, I was putting the word out. I was looking for my own donor, because we don't qualify on the list, so to speak, to get a deceased donor. Our MELD score, which is how they rank the priority of who should be getting the deceased donors, for most colorectal cancer patients, it's around a 7. For most people that need to get the liver transplants, it's up in the 30s. So you can see we're not even close to getting that list. So almost all of us need to find our own donors. And all these people that have gone before me were telling me that there was at least 5 to 7 people that went for them, that got screened, that weren't a match before they actually got their approved donor. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, well, if all these people are stepping up to be living donors, where are they going if they're not a match for this person? Sure, not everybody's going to want to donate to a stranger, but I'm sure a lot of those people would do it for anybody that they could help. And so this idea came to me that instead of losing these people, what I should do is create a site where I can start asking people to sign up to be donors, and then match them with fellow colorectal cancer patients that were pursuing a liver transplant and needing donors. So this is one thing that I started doing. But all these advocacy groups that I was involved with, including Share My Liver, what started happening was, when I had the idea, I didn't hope that somebody else would create this. I believe that if I created it, I could make an impact. And what I'm starting to see now is people coming up to me, some people I don't even know, at events. I have people texting me or messaging me on Facebook all the time, asking about a liver donation. And can they talk to me because they're thinking about going down that route and seeing if they're a potential candidate, or they already know that they're a potential candidate, but want to know what the process is, what the surgery is like, how difficult it is to find a donor, those types of questions. And so, if I would have just hoped that somebody else would have created this, none of this would be possible. If I would have hoped that somebody else would be my advocate, none of this would have happened. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today. And so I believe this from the very beginning. But that also, advocacy, I think, has another thing other than just us creating awareness and making an impact. There's also the fact that we need to become our own biggest advocate. Now, I will tell you, early on in my treatment, I had a very good first oncologist, but he was very far away. Well, not very far, because I know a lot of people drive like 2 hours for their infusions and treatments, but I was like 45 minutes away, and I live in a major metropolitan area. So he was kind of curious about why I was going that far. But the piece of advice he gave me was, every step along the way, you find a second, third, fourth, and even fifth opinion. You take as many opinions as you need to get comfortable with who's treating you and what the treatment plans are, and that you feel confident in them. And I did feel very confident in him. But the one thing that I wanted to do was find somebody closer to my house so I wouldn't have to be driving 45 minutes every 2 weeks. So he referred me to another oncologist in the same network. And what she told me when I went there was that I had 3 years to live, and that she wanted to put me on a different chemo regimen to give me the highest quality of life. Now, as she was telling me all this, I knew what the odds were. The odds were 15% that I would actually live to 5 years, 3 to 5 years. That's what it is for stage 4 colorectal cancer patients. I'm coming up on my 3 years right now. But what I believed when she told me that was her story. I didn't just think that I was going to be in that 15%. I believed that I was going to be part of that 15%, and I needed to get somebody else that believed that for me as well and wanted to help get me there. So that led me to get into Moffitt Cancer Center and really get the biggest return I could on getting me to the place where I wanted to go, which was hopefully get a liver transplant. So that brought me into Moffitt. Moffitt is not a center that does liver transplants. They are great at chemotherapy. They are great at immunotherapy, other treatment options, but they just do not do too many solid organ transplants. So chemotherapy, they did a great job. They put me on a combination of chemotherapies. It was really aggressive, but gave me really intense side effects. Even after that, when we cut it out because I was starting to get some permanent neuropathy, they still saw positive results in that. All this, I strongly believe, was because I just didn't think the chemo was going to work. I believed it was going to work. I believed I was going to be part of that 15% that was going to be a survivor. And so as I was doing this, I started researching through the groups that I would belong to, transplants. Now, I will tell you that most centers need you to be under chemotherapy or another treatment option for 12 months and really see positive results from it, meaning no growth, no spreading. Sorry, my alarm's going off and I can't stop it. There we go. I need to take medication for my transplant, but so what they do is they make you go see positive results in chemotherapy for 12 months. Then you start getting your primary tumor removed. So for me, that was my colon, part of my colon. They had to remove where the tumor was. I got that done. There was a bunch of tests that they needed done, like a biopsy of a lymph node that showed enlarged on one of my scans, et cetera, et cetera. So after about 8 months, after I originally talked to the transplant surgeon, I then had my donor meeting. That was the green light for you to go out and start finding your own donor. For most people, this takes between about 6 to 8 months. It took me over 14 months to find a donor. And that donor wasn't even somebody that I knew. It was somebody that called for somebody else, and the hospital asked them if they would want to be a donor for me. But why I'm telling you it took me 14 months is during that 14 months, my belief that this transplant was going to happen and that I was going to find a donor was tested. I'm not saying believing is easy. I'm saying believing can be tested and tested and tested again and again and again. And I learned so much through that searching process of looking for a donor. I say that was the most difficult part of my cancer story so far, was searching for that donor. And it could come with very easy, because I had other options open up, like a liver resection and everything else that might have been a possibility for me. But the one thing I believed this whole time was that a liver transplant was going to be what worked for me to give me the best chances to live a non-cancer or cancer-free life for many years to come, not just for many months. And so really looking at that was a huge, challenge. But probably one of the most rewarding things that ever happened to me is finding that I had that donor. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about, and then we can open it up to some questions, is, I also really looked at cancer from the very beginning as a gift. And I'm going to explain that a little bit, because I know a lot of people, especially if you're recently diagnosed, you're probably thinking, how in the world can this be a gift? Well, I'm telling you, not just because I'm an ED, but I could tell you this even a year ago, 2 years ago, when I was sitting here listening to people tell things about me that normally they would only say at my funeral. I was getting to hear them when I was alive. That is a beautiful thing. That's a reward, a gift that you were given to actually hear the impact that you've had on other people's lives. Fuels you to want to do more. And here I had tons of people coming up to me and sharing things that, like I said, normally I know I've been to enough funerals. These are only things that you never get to hear because you're not there. But they're saying such great things and the impact that you had in your life. And I got to hear these while I was alive. The other thing is the friends that I have met, through this cancer journey. It has been amazing. Some of the people I'm coming in contact with, it's been incredibly sad at times because I've lost quite a few of those people. But the ones that I'm still here with today, we are creating together such an impact and bonding over something that we never wish we had. But now we're finding things out about each other that aren't cancer related, and what we can do outside of that cancer world, right? And those friendships are unlike any other friendships I've had. Even like some of my childhood friends don't have the same connection that I have with some of the people that I've met through this cancer journey. And the last thing I want to tell you about is, what I've created with Share My Liver is truly, one of the greatest gifts I could ever feel. I've always said from the time I had this idea of trying to match other people was, if I matched one person and saved one person's life, it would be worth it. In 2 days after I learned that I had my living donor, I got a call that somebody I was trying to help actually had a friend of mine call up and tell her that she was going to be her donor and donated her liver to her. And so it's just an amazing feeling. And it brought me such joy to see this. But after I've gone through my liver transplant and started realizing some different things is, there's a lot of bureaucracy if you want to become a true matching system. There's a lot of HIPAA restrictions and everything else. And for anybody that knows me, I'm not that person. I do not want to be that academic and that regimented. I want to make more of an impact and let other people feel the impact of what we're trying to do for them. And so what I wanted to do was kind of shift focus and turn Share My Liver into a nonprofit, because everybody, at least in the colorectal cancer world that I see getting a living liver transplant, is white. And I know that the health disparities are out there. I know we can do something about this. And so if I can remove the financial barrier from getting a living donor liver transplant for colorectal cancer patients off the table and make sure that they have the funds to be able to travel, to be able to stay remote in a different city for probably 2 months, and to make sure that if they're losing their wages, that they're still able to afford and pay for their bills while they're getting the liver transplant. Those are things that I'm setting up the nonprofit, but it's also going to be a one-to-one mentoring and peer-to-peer network for both donors and recipients. So we can create more awareness. So more people are aware that they can donate a liver or part of their liver to somebody while they're still living. They don't have to just sign their driver's license. And the other thing is for the people going through this, whether it be a colorectal cancer patient or just somebody with a liver disease that's needing a living donor liver transplant, that we can help guide them in what the search is like, what resources we suggest and we've seen work for other people, but then also like explain insurance approvals for living donor liver transplants, which are not widely accepted because they're experimental, but experimental it's a made up term from the insurance company. It doesn't mean anything other than their reason for denial. And also to help understand what it's like to actually go through the surgery and post-surgery. I'm 4.5 months post-surgery now. I will say that I'm doing extremely well physically, but I know that mentally it's a huge challenge. It's more of a challenge than when I learned I had cancer. It's more of a challenge than when I went through trying to find a donor. Just kind of the what's next aspect. But the one thing I keep telling myself is, I believe that I'm going to get better. I'm not hoping that I'm mentally going to get better. I know I'm going to get better. And so starting to talk to a therapist this week and everything else is really about that. But Tim, that's kind of my story. And I know I left quite hopefully a good amount of time for some questions to come in.
Thank you so much, Tim. And I'm so glad you brought up about therapy. I was talking earlier about how I recently started seeing a therapist after my cancer came back. And I feel like both cancer and therapy are two things that are not talked about. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I wanted to ask you one question before I invite others to ask questions. Yesterday during the event, we talked about ways to find joy even during our cancer journeys, no matter where we are in them. I'm curious for you, both from a short-term perspective and a long-term perspective, what is one way in the short term that you can find happiness or joy, and then maybe like 5 or 10 years out, what's something you're maybe thinking about in a different in a way that you could find joy in a longer term as well?
Yeah, well, I think, and I gotta say, my grandkids gave me joy through the whole treatment process, so that really got me through through that. But I think to answer your question in a more definitive way that I think you're going in is really what brings me joy. And I remember being in the hospital right after my transplant, recovering, them telling me that I couldn't work for 3 months, and me being on the phone and answering text with other patients that were considering getting a liver transplant, and then being able to connect them with my surgeon who did my liver transplant. And I just looked at the nurse in the room and I said, now you guys are telling me that I shouldn't be working, but look at what I just did. And the fact that I'm not on any pain medication right now. And why do you think that is? It's because this is filling me with so much joy that I don't need pain medication. Yet most people would consider what I just did work. And so I think, those one-on-one conversations that I have with people to either help them, make them aware of a living liver transplant, or to help them understand, what the process is going to be like, from the time you first start talking through your recovery. That's really what brings me the most joy right now is that. I think in 5 years, what would bring me the most joy is if I'm not having to have these conversations one-on-one, and I'm able to create a community of people that are helping each other. And so we're able to help about 100 times more people than I would just be able to do on my own.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. So does anybody have any questions for Tim that are here at the live event? Oh, well, you want to come over? Shannon would like to say hi. Anybody have any questions for after Shannon's hi?
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Shan, how you doing?
Hey, I get to see you twice in a week now. That's great. I
I
just want to
know.
say I absolutely love you, and I am so proud of you being such an advocate for yourself and saving your own life, and now taking that and paying it forward and saving others, literally. And just the source of support and encouragement and hope and positivity and light that you are in our community. You're just great, and I'm just so glad that you're here and that you're doing so well, and that you found somebody who's just as amazing as you and gave you part of her liver to save your life. Like, it's just a beautiful story, and I love Beth, so please tell her that I say thank you. And I saw you, and you just look so great, and you're so happy and so healthy, and I love you very much. So thank you for all you do.
Oh, thank you, Shan. I love you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any other questions for Tim? No? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Tim. We so appreciate you being here. And
Yeah, thank you.
thank you.